School is back, and Dick's Sporting Goods has what you need to win your year. We've got everything from cleats to Sambas, dunks, and more. Plus, the hottest looks from Nike, Jordan, and Adidas. Find your first day fits in-store or online at dicks.com.
Hello, and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster Sam Baker. I cannot be cool about today's guest, so I am not even going to try. Ever since I started The Shift, I had a wish list, and high up on it from the very first day was Dame Zandra Rhodes. Yes, that Zandra Rhodes. There can only be one, after all. For over 50 years, Zandra has been a leading figure in the British fashion industry, renowned for her prints and her use of colour. Over the years, she's dressed everyone from Princess Diana to Debbie Harry by way of Freddie Mercury and Diana Ross, and she's collaborated with the likes of M&S and Ikea. Zandra is nothing if not egalitarian. Now she's 83 and in remission from the terminal cancer she was diagnosed with at the start of COVID, and she has no plans to stop anytime soon. For evidence, just see her new book, Iconic: My Life in Fashion in 50 Objects. It's a whistle-stop tour through her incredible life, hanging out with Ossie Clark, lunching with Truman Capote, making a lifelong friend of the legendary Vogue editor Diana Vreeland. Anyway, that is how I get to be on my way to Bermondsey to hang out at her fabulous flat and talk about her equally fabulous life.
Once I thought I'd try and look slightly conservative, and I had my hair dyed brown. And I felt so boring. And then I went to a dinner party and people would say, "Oh, excuse me, I'm Mary Jane." And I go, "Oh, yes, I'm Zandra Rhodes." And then they go, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Zandra and I sat down with a cuppa to discuss how a boring little girl, her words, not mine, became synonymous with big, bold, uncompromising style, being a lifelong workaholic, living a child-free life, using clothes and makeup as armour, and the rejection that was the absolute making of her. I have spent a happy several hours in the life of Zandra Rhodes.
Oh, gosh.
No, it's been amazing. It's amazing.
I'm quite pleased with how it's come out. I mean, Ella worked hard with me on it. So
is she a ghostwriter or a co-writer or a
ghostwriter, really? But I knew her from when she was a student, so I know her quite well.
Yeah, so you trusted her. It's not deeply personal, but there's personal stuff in there.
She was very good at winkling out bits of me that I hadn't even been able to face, which was very interesting.
She's a fashion journalist.
That was very clever. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was quite impressed, really, when I sort of read through the whole thing. I thought, oh, it's very personal. And then I came to terms with it, and it wasn't as bad.
No, I don't think there's one bit that really made me laugh where you said, and this happened, and I have no interest in talking about it further. So we won't. It just really made me laugh.
I think it's probably about my father.
Yeah, it was related to your father, yeah. Yeah.
But since then, I mean, my sister's granddaughter's the one who did all that research on what the actual truth about family was, which I'd never faced because I was close to my mother, and my poor father, I think he got a rotten deal, really.
It's interesting, isn't it? Before we talk about the book, I do just want to say it is amazing to be sat in this room surrounded by some of the objects that I've just been reading about. The amazing table.
And the stone over here, the first stone.
It's the first stone, the Australian one.
The agate.
I wouldn't know an agate if it smacked me, but amazing.
But it's not solid. It obviously is only on the edges.
Yeah, on the edges. Yeah, otherwise you'd be, I don't know.
I'd be quite well.
Yeah, you'd be minted.
Yes. So those are the start of different things. The screen.
Yeah, the beautiful screen. Painting.
Doug is painting,
Doug
yes.
is painting. Yeah.
So they're all real objects.
They're all things that you live with. What was it that made you decide that now was the time to write a memoir and to do it through the things in your life?
That was Ella's idea. She put several different ideas to the publisher. She said, I'd like to do a book. She put several ideas to the publisher. And then, of course, she did spend a lot of time sitting with me alone when there was no one else in. So she had my attention.
Yeah,
so
that must have been fascinating. So were you at a point where you wanted to write and where you wanted to look back over your life and revisit it?
Hadn't thought of that. Hadn't thought of, and that's the head there.
Oh, yes.
That's the head. The copy is the original is in the National Portrait Gallery, so that's the head. It's been a very interesting uncovering my life, as it were. And particularly when, even towards the end, we've been honest that, because just before COVID, just as COVID started, when they said, oh, well, you've got 6 months to live. And I said, what? I said, don't tell anyone because I won't get any work.
I felt like that at the end where you write about that. I felt like that really, it felt like, I don't know you, but it felt like it summed you up. And you said, I couldn't go public because it would affect business.
Yeah, I wouldn't get any work. And they say, well, we're not going to give her a job if she's going to be dead.
But you were given 6 months to live 4 years ago. What are you doing here?
I'm still working.
Still working, still going. What did the doctors say? You defied medical...
Oh, no, it was a growth. And then they gave me this treatment. And then they said with the growth had shrunk. So, I think it's a matter of luck if you get something and it shrinks. But I've got another friend that almost is the same. About six years before, he was at a friend's party and he did a ballet dance because he knew he was dying in
a belly dance or a ballet.
He was ballet. He did a ballet dance and said, "This is my last tribute to the world," because he was dying in 6 months or so, and he's still here. So we always laugh about the same thing.
How did that feel when you found out you had cancer?
When I found out I'd had cancer, I said, "Don't tell anyone," and then I made sure my will was in place, that I had non-resuscitation. Then I started to catalogue all the clothes because there were boxes everywhere, neatly hidden, but there were boxes everywhere.
Is that what's under those throws?
Well, those aren't clothes, are still what's left of things I haven't sorted. So it was a case of really sorting out everything and making sure that it was all going to be catalogued for where it was going to go.
So you immediately went into your kind of
active mode.
Control, active. I'm going to work through this. I'm going to sort it all out.
And don't tell anyone because I won't get any work.
Have you always been a collector? This room is...
I'm a hoarder. Downstairs, the boxes are stacked in my workroom. The whole wall's boxes, which we've been gradually working out what museums they go to and where it goes to and what's going to happen to it.
So you can't bear to part with anything?
Well, we're gradually making sure it goes to a home.
Yeah, but so much of this stuff you've picked up throughout your life, is it a thing you consciously do?
No, they're all mementos. Like all of these are pictures of me with my boyfriend from when he was 91 to when he was 98.
Oh,
and these were in our home in California. So they all came back and ended up here.
And he hadn't died very long before you got cancer, had he?
He died the May of COVID years. So COVID was declared at the end of
March 2020.
Yes, right. So it was declared. So he died May 2019.
May 2019.
Conveniently. Or I'd have had trouble travelling backwards and forwards and
you wouldn't
like that.
have been able to, would you?
I know, because I didn't marry him. So when I had to pack up, it had to be packed up remotely by my secretary. I know.
Oh. Did you regret not marrying him?
Not really, I don't think. No. Didn't mean any less. I didn't marry him.
Because you met, didn't you, when you were in your early...
I was already in my mid-50s. I'd have to look at the dates, but, probably in my mid-50s.
Because one of the things that really struck me about the book and that I actually really, really identified with was how, trying to remember what the phrase you used, which really struck me. You never prioritized domesticity. And then you said you doubted your humanity for not prioritizing domesticity. Do you think Did you consciously put work before everything else?
I just always enjoyed my work, and I never had, at the right time, I never had a relationship where I felt that, most of my relationships fell apart because of my work ethic. Whereas I met someone with a work ethic and he'd be saying, terribly sorry, can't make this evening, I'm at work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you got that because you were doing the same.
Exactly, so it didn't make any difference. But his marriage had fallen apart because the poor wife probably was at home waiting and she cooked dinner and he didn't come home.
People would just say, well, that's normal, isn't it? But if the other way round, people are like, well, that's your fault because either way, the woman's meant to either put up with it or change.
So anyway, but he didn't notice, so it was very useful.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your mum because she was really, really influential, wasn't she, on little Zandra?
My mother was very influential. She looked exotic. And of course, when she came to school open days, she looked so exotic. She didn't look like any of the other mothers, in these high-heeled, green, double-platformed, green lizard shoes. Do you know what I mean? And her hair up high, and then there's all these terrible things always happen to her, like when we went on the bus, what's called the workman's train, early in the morning, and she got ready in a hurry. She was always in a hurry. And, she had the hair, she pinned this wonderful hair curl up on top because the rest was in a bun. And she sprayed it silver, and then she'd sprayed the hairspray to keep it in place. And then all the way on the bus, she kept saying, my head does sting. My head does sting. And then she realised she'd picked up the fly killer spray instead of the lotion. So we then went to the local chemist, which was already open at that time in the morning at the station. And she'd go in and say, you may think I'm an idiot, but, and the man said, well, unless you go home and wash your hair, you're going to have to live with it all day, which she did. But I think it wore off. She was all right.
God knows what was in it.
I know. In those days as well, it would have, mean, do you know what I mean? In those days, there could have been all sorts of things in it that they didn't check on.
So your mum was a fashion teacher?
Well, she taught dressmaking and draping in the art college that I went to. When I went there at the age of I was 17, I didn't ever tell people she was my mother, although apparently they all knew, but I wasn't intending. I never thought I'd go into clothes. It was only later on when I'd left Royal College and I was designing prints for clothes and no one else was convinced. You know what I mean? And I realised that the only way that they'd become convinced was to make clothes myself.
So your mum didn't influence you to go into fashion?
No way.
The reverse.
Probably she was just there when I wanted a blouse made to look lovely at a college dress show and copy it from a magazine. I mean, who else's mother can do something like that? It was only later, after she died, that I'm trying to sell my prints and everyone says they're too extreme. And it's only then you think, I don't know why. I think, well, I've got to learn. I've got to get someone to show me how to make the patterns. And then I put a collection together and took it to America where they didn't know that I was a textile designer doing it. Nowadays, I think people can cross over far more easily than they could then.
I mean, your parents' relationship was very unusual for the time, wasn't it? I mean, your mum was very busy and dynamic and out. I mean, was she actually the breadwinner?
She was really the breadwinner. My father earned a minimum wage and didn't really contribute much, which must have been very balls-breaking. It must have been awful, really. Like he'd say, you can't have toast with butter and jam. And we go, well, Mummy pays for it. I mean, yeah, it's not, when I look back at the whole thing. But on the other hand, those were the days people stayed together. Yeah. He was more like Elf Garnett in Death Do Us Part.
So
if you ever
very
watched
much,
that program.
So very much not like your mum.
Not like my mother, but he was very handsome. So obviously they met when they were at ballroom dancing classes and they became Kent champions. You know what I mean? And she made all these exotic dresses. So he looked like Errol Flynn. I mean, but I felt as a child he should have worked and bettered himself. But maybe he wasn't able to do that. I don't know.
I mean, there's no way of knowing, is there, what the dynamics are? He fought in the war, presumably.
He would have been, everyone would have been called up for their national service. So he was in Egypt for what would be I don't know, 3 years or so, you know what I mean?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's so, I mean, with both the First World War and the Second World War, one of the things that did happen a bit was that women were out working and then the men came back, ones who did come back, and wanted their jobs back.
Oh, and you mean women might have had them?
And women were like...
I know my mother drove an ambulance during the war.
You were born in 1940, weren't
1940.
you? Do you remember?
The only slight thing I can vaguely remember is drawing chalk butterflies on one of those corrugated iron air raid shelters that was down in our garden, and being on my father's shoulder on VE Day with all the people cheering in the street. But apart from that, I don't really remember anything.
You were teeny
about it.
What kind of little girl were you?
I think I was probably very boring. I think I was a very boring little girl I had these funny plaques, and I was always drawing and painting. I don't think, like my sister, I can't remember really playing with dolls, although I did dress Jacqueline, the doll, in there. I was more likely to be painting things and drawing things. And then when I was at school, I always did my homework, but I remembered it was nice doing maps in my history book with all coloured sea around the edge of the maps, or drawing pictures in the French exercise book with labelling what things were. I enjoyed being at school, had no problem.
Were you a swotty kid?
Yes, I was a swotty kid. And my sister, who was 3 years after me, really said it was horrible being my sister, because they go, you don't work like your sister does. And she said, I couldn't bear that. It was awful. So I think she found it very difficult.
Was she good at other things? I mean, was she like popular and outgoing, or?
She was possibly more outgoing, and she used to go out with her boyfriends, whereas I had a strict discipline thing that I might go out to the coffee shop. It was the days when you went to the coffee shops, and I had ballroom dancing classes one evening a week. That's where you met boyfriends as well. Might go out with my mother shopping on a Saturday. But apart from that, as I got a bit older, I'd just be doing my homework at home. I wouldn't be going out otherwise. My mother used to worry and say, you don't go out enough. I was quite happy at school.
Where do you think you got that work ethic from?
Oh, I got my work ethic from my mother, because she also would always be at home making dresses. So there'd be a dress stand and wonderful officiel French magazines around. If we were good, we could sit and watch her do bridal fittings, because she made bride and bridesmaid dresses at home and had a label that said Beatrice. Did it say Beatrice Rhodes? Court dressmaker. So she made dresses for people who were being presented at court. So we were allowed to watch if we didn't talk or fight each other.
In the book, you say, I'm an extension of her ambition. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I think that I'm doing what my mother would have wanted to do. I think that, so I think that but she never knew, because she'd already died. She was chain smoked. So she'd already died of lung cancer, probably before I'd even started to really realize making dresses and going to America with them.
Can you remember how old you were when you kind of found your thing, when you thought, this is it, this is who I want to be?
I don't think I really found my thing, as it were, properly until I started to do my own collections. And that would be my first collection in 1969. There was no way out by then. I knew I didn't want to teach, and I'd got ideas for the prints and worked out how I could make things and experimenting. Although now when I look back, I don't know how I found the time.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? The stuff that you pack in.
I know.
Day.
I mean, maybe she was guiding me from afar. Who knows? I mean, when I look back to my career, it's like a fairy tale that I can't believe sometimes.
Amazing. I was reading about, well, tell us about the trip to America that kind of launched your career, where you met Diana Vreeland.
A young editress here in English Vogue called Merritt Allen, who later became Merritt Lieberson. But Merritt Allen loved what I was doing. First of all, I'd met her when I was with Sylvia Ayton, but then she saw the things I was just designing, which were the chiffon dresses, and she'd take them into Vogue, and then they got them photographed. And then through an American friend, Richard Holley, who was an American interior decorator, same age as myself, and he'd originally gone to Parsons in New York and happened to end up living in London. And he said, and he was a great friend of Moya Bowler, who was the shoe designer of the really late 60s, very fashionable Moya Bowler. And he said, come to America, you can come and stay with me. And I'd met these two mad Ukrainian models that used to like wafting around in my scarves, and they said, Zandra, you're brilliant. You know, people do say that. But anyway, so they floated around in my chiffon caftans, and they were photographed on the cover for English Vogue. Between Merritt Allen and between Beatrix Miller, who was the head of English Vogue, she sent an email over. Actually, it wouldn't have been an email. Probably it would have been a...
Would it even have been a fax?
It probably would have been a fax. See how quickly we forget. No, they didn't have faxes.
Telegram.
She would have sent probably, she would either have made a phone call, yes, or she might have sent what would you send in those? Isn't that weird? It frightens me how little I remember. But she sent a thing in advance saying, please, to Diana Vreeland, the high priestess, please have a look at Zandra Rhodes' work. So I go over and I bother to dress. I've got my best beaver boots on, which are written about in the book, you know, the high white beaver boots that I'd whiten each night, so they look lovely and white. Yeah. And my chiffon dresses and the headscarf with the red curls that I'd drawn in lipstick down my face. She was extraordinary because she had this wonderful hook nose, and all the edge of her face was shaded in red, and this dyed black hair. She really was an amazing looking woman, and she just raved about the collection and said, we'll photograph it immediately. And she called up Natalie Wood and got her in. It was like I wasn't even treading on air. I must have had a cloud to bring me in, because it was just so amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it?
When I look back, I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, it is like a fairy tale, but these things have to happen to someone.
She raved about the things and said, and photographed them, whereas now I doubt whether even with my name, I couldn't get an appointment to go in. I'd be phoning up and no one would answer. But maybe that's what happens today.
Well, I think I want to talk to you about that in a bit, but I wonder too whether the cracks in the social armour that people who weren't well connected used to sneak through, like that one that you snuck through.
Yes.
Whether they've closed up. Do you think it could happen today?
I don't believe it could, but maybe it happens differently. You know, that's how it happened to me. And then, so it really launched my career properly and led to all the other things, like whether it led to someone over here, Ronnie Sterling, backing my shop here. Just the belief and people wanting and coming to my funny studio, like Peter Sellers and Britt Eklund coming and ordering a dress, or David Bailey ordering a dress for Paloma Picasso. And it was all, you know, it was very hand to mouth. I mean, I'd be in there cutting it out myself, printing it myself. The only thing I wasn't doing was machining. So I was working all different hours.
Do you think sometimes it's something to do with a time and a place? Like, say, all the writers in Paris in the 1920s? Or do you think London at that time, that part of London?
You had David Bailey, Twiggy coming, you know, all these people. It was a blossoming here, and we were able to somehow transcend over to there together with the music.
Can you remember what it felt like being, young and creative and feeling like, did you feel like there were no limits? How did you feel?
It was just an adventure that I, in a way, went along with and didn't realise I was riding on the crest of a wave.
I suppose it's only when you look back, isn't it?
When I look back and I think, this is extraordinary.
How old were you when you developed the look that has become you?
If you look in different books where I'm pictured, my looks changed quite a few times. Sometimes I look at it and I think, oh my God, that's so ridiculous. Or that's so, I had I put glue on and have fluorescent green dots. Another time it was wiggles. I do believe as a designer, if you believe in your work, I should be wearing it. Otherwise, I don't mean everything I design looks good on me.
Mm.
If you're designing something, or if I'm doing a curtain, or if I'm doing, I design things that I would use, that I would feel proud using. If I wouldn't feel proud using them, for me personally, it doesn't fit into my world.
When did you go pink? When did that happen?
I went pink in 1980. I'd already got green hair. That happened in about 1972 when Vidal Sassoon brought out green wigs. And I tried on a green wig and it pinched my head. And I suddenly thought, if you can dye sheep's wool, why can't you dye hair if it's on your head? And so I went into Vidal Sassoon and said, would they bleach my hair? And they wouldn't do it. They said, you're not doing your hair, it's black. So then I went into Leonard, and he was really the one who was the experimental hairdresser who then did my shows from the 70s through to the mid-80s. He bleached my hair, and then I thought, well, it must be like sheep. And I'm a textile designer, and we tried green dye. It wasn't the perfectest, but, it used to go sort of slightly yellowish colour.
Mm.
But anyway, so I tried out, and I had feathers stuck on the end with eyelash glue. It was my hair, the complete look that I suppose I was really known for. And some of them I can look back and think that was a mistake, and others I liked it. So, and then I went to China in 1979. The only thing you'd see in China were people in navy blue army uniforms. It's not like now. And then I came back to do a Chinese collection. I thought, red China. And the strongest dye I knew I could use was pink. So I dyed my hair pink. And it's been that colour ever since.
Have you ever deviated?
Once I thought I'd try and look slightly conservative, and I had my hair dyed brown. And I felt so boring. And then I went to a dinner party and people would say, oh, excuse me, I'm Mary Jane. And I go, oh, yes, I'm Zandra Rhodes. And then they go, oh, I'm sorry. And it was so embarrassing that they were sorry that they hadn't recognised me that I thought, this is stupid. I'd much rather be what I am, and that's it.
Did you recognise yourself?
Oh, recognise myself, because it looked like when I was young, but it was still boring.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Do you think there's a little bit, this is like quite a nosy question, but do you think there's a little bit of you that wanted to look as flamboyant as you did? Because in a way, it meant people wouldn't look any further. Do you know what I mean? Like that people look at your look and they make like you say in the book, they make an assumption that you're wild and anti-establishment. And so then they don't ask nosy questions like I am now.
I don't feel any more deeply than that, except that I don't look for very long. Like at the moment, my haircut, I think, is a bit too short. I think it looks a bit wrong here because I had it cut to look like an old photograph to do a mock-up for the book for something else. But apart from that, if I haven't got my makeup on, I feel boring. I think it's really a suit of armour. I find that for me, dressing's a suit of armour that I can hide behind.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you can face anybody and anything.
Yes, you've got your suit of armour on.
There's a point in the book where you say you're a contrary mix of chaotic and fastidious.
Well, I'm basically a boring Virgo. I'm not very tidy, but I'm sort of meticulous. I mean, look, I have a diary with what my appointments are on one side
Very
and
busy.
on the other, all my different jobs that I'm supposed to do. Doesn't mean I get them done. But like when I was at school, I suppose I looked more boring. I had my brown hair and I was like in my school uniform. Whereas now my job is to look interesting and make myself feel interesting. So, I have my Andrew Logan brooch on and I dress myself up so that you don't notice the details like I'm getting fatter or something.
Have you ever just worn jeans and a T-shirt?
Oh, yes, I've got jeans and a T-shirt, but usually I will have decorated the jeans.
Yeah.
And like I say, I mean, I have a rule that you always dress for an interview.
Yeah.
So if you saw me when I'm not being interviewed, I'd look a lot worse than this.
But I get that because I think even if your persona is you, if you're going to do a work thing, an interview or an event, you have to go as the work you.
You have to respect the person. Like when I've said to kids when they come to me for even an internship, and you say, always dress up, because as a person interviewing, if I have some student come, even I know it might be just an ordinary basic job, if they've dressed up, you think, well, that person has bothered to at least treasure the job or show that they're interested. Whereas if you just go and say, this is me, take it or leave it, you're expecting the other person to do all the giving or whatever it is.
Do you like having young people around?
Oh, yes, I haven't got children, but I love having young people around and they've all got their own way of interpreting things. And I think it keeps one young.
Did you decide not to have children or did that just happen?
It just happened. I was once madly in love with someone who it ended up that it didn't work out. And at the time I thought, I'd like his children. And then it went wrong. It ended up that way. But so we always laugh. My sister says, I've had your amount of children because she's got 4 children.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't regret. I've got wonderful friends. And, so I can keep myself going with my wonderful friends.
Maybe it's an act, but you seem to have this really admirable self-belief. For instance, when Oscar de la Renta and then Saint Laurent asked you to make prints for them but wouldn't put your name on the print, you said no.
Maybe it's something like one's mother. It didn't cross me. It didn't cross my mind as ballsy when I did it. I just felt that I was making my name and I needed to make my name to sell the prints. Secondly, although it might look like it might look like I'm always prolific and I've always got lots of ideas, but underneath, I don't always have that. And sometimes you're hunting around thinking, what's going to be the next idea? What will I do? Because I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't have my work. So I keep finding a job.
Do you think that will be you forever? You'll always be creating?
I think I'll always be creating in some way or other. A lot of it is, I could look around. If you look behind the scenes in here, it looks very good when you're looking at the front bit. But behind the scenes, I do need to do a lot of redecorating downstairs and haven't had time to do it. So I might fit that in.
But I think it's, as well with a creative, there's such a fine line, isn't there, between work and not?
You're right. Well, the other thing I'm very lucky is most of my close friends are creative. So, Andrew Logan, who's one of the chapters with the head that's in the National Portrait Gallery, he never really stops work. He's always working on a new portrait or or things like that. So that most of my friends have been inspirational. And when Dougie was alive, my friend who did the painting that he had to sue me for because I hadn't got the money to pay for it, I paid him eventually, but I would phone him up regularly and say, I'm really stuck. And he'd talk to me and I'd say, I haven't got any ideas, or why don't you try this? So, I've got close friends that will sort of spur me on, as it were.
What was it about you think that made you always go it alone? You never worked for anyone else, did you? You never worked for any of the big boys, and they are boys, aren't they?
I went for jobs with the big boys. I think I've got the story in there about going. They thought I'd be perfect for Pucci
because of the print.
And because of my prints, and he was a big influence because he was doing dresses that were all one print. I went to see the grand man and spread my designs out on the floor, and then he said, I suggest you design in black and white, and walked off. So, you never know. Maybe it was me that did a favor for me, because he didn't say, oh, come and work it. My college people, the two tutors, thought he'd offer me a job, but he didn't offer me a job. So,
but like you say, he might have done you a favor, because if you'd been working at Pucci, you might never have met Diana Vreeland.
Exactly. So, I always say to students, the main thing in life is not to give up. I think what's been interesting in doing the book is looking how all the different adventures led me to different things.
Well, you live it.
Yes, I completely live my work. And most of the friends that I have round live theirs, So you'd always see Andrew covered in jewels, and Dougie would have always been representing his paintings, So, and I think in art, you've got to do that, because now you can't always rely on the right press for things, and you just have to enjoy the adventure and see where the adventure leaves you to.
Has that always been your attitude, or is that as you've got older?
I suppose it's always been my attitude. Mainly is I do my work and then I have to find an outlet for it. I think, I've got to do my work. Like right at the beginning of COVID, when they said you're not going to live much longer, and I just negotiated doing an Ikea job. So I didn't want Ikea to think, well, we're not going to use her now. She won't be here. I'm always pleased. I try and get jobs that I feel where people will appreciate what I do, and it will go into people's houses and they can use it, which is nice.
Have you felt conscious of being a woman in the fashion industry?
I never have felt, you can outline it and you can say maybe there are more men in it, but I've never particularly felt prejudiced against. But maybe because I had a very, very strong mother, and she just didn't ever say to me, you're going to be put down. And I didn't ever notice when I was being put down. I think I've just got a very thick skin, like the girl who once wrote to me and said, sorry, we used to laugh at you when we were on the bus to going to school. And I didn't know they were laughing at me, so it didn't make any difference.
It was obviously bothering her more than it was bothering you. Earlier you said about wearing your own clothes, and there's quite a lot of chat at the moment about dominance again of male designers in the fashion industry. Do you think fashion would be different if there were more female designers? Do you think female designers design differently?
I think we're going through a very difficult period where we're dealing with huge conglomerates that have taken over
everything.
But it might be that suddenly someone will rear their head in some way or other and invent a different thing to wear, and it will be from a woman. It's difficult. There don't seem to be many people that you're reading about at this moment, but at the moment it's like a very weird period where fashion is more multiple conglomerates. Even then, someone doesn't always realise that a woman is behind them, like with Alexander McQueen. They had a very strong woman working with that. Sonia Rykiel did wonderful knitwear, or you can go even further back to Sonia Delaunay, who was an incredible forerunner. I think we're just so conscious of the moment of being aware of this fact. But I think as women, we're best to pretend we're not aware of it and just keep going forward with strength, and who knows what will happen.
Were you ever approached to sell your business?
It never really happened that I was approached to sell my business. Now I look back and I'm pleased that I'm just me, and it's not a huge conglomerate that has overtaken me and everything in my life, but has been something where it's got a slightly artsy look to it, so I can pick and choose with different jobs, like having just done a wonderful print job for Celia B, a wonderful Spanish company. So it's never occurred.
It feels inevitable with any, long career that you go in and out of fashion. What was it like when Zandra Rhodes was out of fashion?
I'd say probably the late 80s, early 90s, where I managed to survive by whatever. My great friend Andrew Logan and his partner Michael saw this building in Bermondsey and said, "Zandra, you've always wanted to do a museum. You've always saved all your clothes. Why don't you buy it?" And I said, "What do you think I am, made of money?"
Yes. Okay.
And then I sold my house and formed a museum. And once I'd done that, people suddenly started looking at my work again and saying, "Oh, you've influenced John Galliano with that," or whatever. You know what I mean? So that you just keep going on whatever way you do. And I mean, I happen to be one of the few rare designers that, of course, I saved my originals. And so I own over 6,000 garments. And we're gradually cataloguing those for the foundation and working out what's going to happen to them.
And you started the foundation when you found out you were ill, didn't you?
That's right. When I found out that I was supposed to be dying in 6 months, I formed the foundation, because otherwise, where would the boxes of clothes go? Whereas now we've been in touch with wonderful museums across the world that are all working out what they need. And I had a fabulous collection based on the rock in the centre of Australia, Uluru. And so Powerhouse in Sydney and the National Gallery of Victoria have both got collections now that I've made sure go there to represent the inspiration that I've had there.
Yeah, it's your legacy is going to stretch because of that, because of the museum, and it's going to stretch way beyond you.
I think the main thing really, though, is I'm here and I'm enjoying what I do. And then it's even more amazing to suddenly realise that I've managed to get together a book with all the different adventures that it led to.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I did spend an incredible few hours got on the journey through your life. And actually, I forgot, I wanted to say to you, one of the objects you write about right at the beginning of the book is the Flower Fairies book.
Oh, did you have a Flower Fairies book?
I didn't have a Flower Fairies book. And my mum will be listening and I want her to feel bad about this. I didn't have
mummy.
Flower Fairies books. But a girl in my school called Diana Vreeland had them all. I used to go around to her house. I loved the Flower Fairies books.
And it helps you know what the flowers are.
Yeah.
And you know the different poems that went with them.
But it was the clothes more than the flowers that influenced you, because they all had special outfits.
They had
amazing
my
outfits.
poppy fairy that my mother made. I think it was in pink crepe paper, and she'd painted the black bits in the poppy and frilled the edges like poppies. But it really made you learn about the flowers. So I mean, and Chatham in those days was semi-country, so
in Kent, that's where you were born, yeah.
So it's very, it you can go out and you can recognise the different flowers and the weeds that grow out, like a purpley one called Herb Robert. Well, I know because it had a little poem, and it grows as the weeds underneath my peonies.
It's so amazing, isn't it? The things that influence you. I mean, you must have been reading those books when you were tiny.
Oh, well, I was very lucky. My mother and my mother's unmarried sister, because it was wartime at the time, they used to read to me at night, so they would have probably read the poems and said, "Oh, look at the picture." And my sister still does that with her grandchildren. It's quite wonderful.
You're wearing very jazzy gold trainers. And I feel like I missed a trick not wearing my yellow ones. I'm wearing really
my jazzy
ones.
And my jazzy socks. There you go.
We're just jazzy head to toe. Did it ever enter your head to go grey?
My hair?
Yeah.
Oh, that wouldn't enter my head at all. I think if I went grey, I would feel old. I look like me. Luckily, I've got a me look, like your gorgeous hair. You're you. And I think that the whole thing that's important in life is to try and be you. It doesn't mean if you're scruffy, it doesn't mean that whether you're falling to pieces, it doesn't really matter. I like to feel me when I look in the mirror. And I make my eyes up. And then the other day I thought, well, I can see all the wrinkles, but it doesn't, they're going to be there. I don't believe in facelifts. I don't think they do anything for me. But having lived in California partially with my boyfriend, I was used to seeing people who with facelifts.
Never tempted when you were over there?
They sometimes drop. That's what's worse. Where they start with what I always call fish lips, and then they pad their cheeks. But if it's bad, the cheeks sometimes drop. That can be very difficult.
Yeah, I think. Each to their own. What's your emotional age?
I still do things that I don't like to think that I'm going around 80. I do sometimes feel 80, but not often.
When you're climbing those stairs.
When I'm good. You noticed I was out of breath when I came upstairs.
Could you give us a book recommendation?
A friend of mine has written this book, and it's called, The Ticket Collector of Belarus. My friend, a banker, decided he'd write a book, and it's about this Polish guy who joined the Nazis and killed a whole lot of people, then managed to escape and be brought over and got eventually to England without them knowing, and ended up as a ticket collector in London Bridge Station round the corner from here. And it was and he was the only person tried in Britain for war crimes.
What advice would you give younger women?
Never give up. Remember, you're as important as the next person, and you're carving the future. So work at it.
Who is your old bird role model?
Diana Vreeland was like a god because her personality was so strong that you were almost overwhelmed with it. Have you ever seen, by the way, that wonderful book of older women all dressing up that's quite mad?
Oh, is that an advanced
style? Advanced style. And they're all wonderful ladies. I had this wonderful woman now, what was she called? Her husband sold men's hats in New York, and she wore my clothes with such amazing style. She was quite wonderful, and she'd always been. Now I can't remember her name.
It wasn't Iris Apfel, was it?
Oh, I knew Iris, and Iris was always wonderful. Funnily enough, she'd always want one of my pieces of Andrew's jewellery whenever we met each other. But she was extraordinary. And I first met Iris when her husband was still alive, and it was Christmas, in her apartment in Palm Beach, Florida. And the whole of you had to walk very carefully because the whole of the apartment was a railway track with snow-covered little railway trains that went round. And it was all done up as Christmas.
Oh,
you had
Lord.
to walk very carefully around it. But it was wonderful. Oh, she was really an inspirational woman.
What's your superpower?
Coloured hair. It takes me anywhere.
It really has.
It has, and it's actually quite useful. It can be difficult when you do something you shouldn't do, but the rest of the time, it's quite useful to have coloured hair.
Do you still use the same hair dye, the one that's in the book?
Oh, that's
Pinkissimo.
Pinkissimo, mixed with a bit of magenta to make it a bit darker, yes. Now it's grey. I don't have to bother always to have it bleached first, so it stays like this all right.
And last one, how many fucks do you give?
I suppose I don't give any. You can never hide the truth, so that I think we all represent ourselves, and I don't mean I'm take it or leave it. You just hope that you contribute enough that your friends like how you are, and you're giving enough that you help them.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.